Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching India Today Global. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi landed in Amman, the capital city of Jordan. He's on a three-country tour, beginning with Jordan. And this tour, which is a part of a three-nation tour, includes Ethiopia and Oman. Prime Minister Modi has held talks with Jordan's King Abdullah II. The visit to Jordan coincides with the 75th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the two countries. The two sides have had bilateral talks that are important to strengthen ties. This comes at a time when we have seen a lot of tensions and strains in West Asia. He was welcomed very warmly by the Indian community and the diaspora there. He highlighted the welcome that he got and the close partnership that Jordan and India share. There's a long-standing relationship of mutual respect and goodwill. The high-level engagements in recent years have significantly strengthened bilateral ties between the two countries. Prime Minister Modi was accompanied by National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, and the bilateral trade that the two sides focused on and spoke about has been expanding steadily. Jordan has emerged as the fourth largest trading partner. In 2023-24, bilateral trade stood at $2.875 billion. That in itself goes to show the importance that the two countries attach to each other. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to meet with some important business leaders and is going to be talking about various important aspects when it comes to bilateral trade between the two countries. He's also going to look at, and the two sides are looking at, cooperation in the sectors of health, education, skill development, science, technology, and capacity building. In a major development in the Ukraine-Russia war, President Zelensky has expressed his willingness to drop Ukraine's bid to join the NATO in exchange for security guarantees from the West. Zelensky met Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner in Berlin. They are scheduled to meet on Monday again. However, the Ukrainian president has not agreed to territorial concessions. The first day of the meeting that took place on Sunday concluded after 5 hours. Sources say President Zelensky has been reviewing the proposals put forth by Witkoff and Kushner. Meanwhile, Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff said, and I quote, "A lot of progress was made." The talks were hosted by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who a source said had made brief remarks before leaving the two sides to negotiate. Other European leaders are also due in Germany for talks on Monday. Russian President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly demanded that Ukraine drop its NATO bid, pull troops from the remaining parts of the Donbas region that it still controls, and remain neutral with no NATO forces on its soil. Earlier this month, Witkoff met Russian President Vladimir Putin, who signaled openness to negotiations but emphasized that Russia maintain strategic control on the ground. And joining us now is Ambassador William Taylor. He was a former ambassador of the United States of America to Ukraine. He's joining me from D.C. Thank you so much, Ambassador Taylor, for joining me. Welcome back. The conversations have moved from the Jared Kushner-Steve Witkoff meeting in Moscow to a Steve Witkoff-Jared Kushner meeting in Berlin, and this time with Zelensky. What are you expecting?
I'm expecting that the Ukrainians and Americans with the Europeans, and it's important that they are meeting in Berlin with European leaders as well. I'm expecting that the three-way conversations will lead to an agreement among those three, the Europeans, Ukrainians, and Americans, on how to end this war. And then the Americans will take that proposal, that agreement, to the Russians, and we'll see what they say. Up until now, the Russians have said no to every proposal. We'll see what they do this time.
But this time, there is a change. There is a climb down when it comes to Ukraine's demand for NATO's membership. He's saying that that certainly is not important anymore, provided there are security guarantees. Can there be enough security guarantees if America is not part of that guarantee, Ambassador Taylor?
No, the United States will have to be part of that guarantee. And I think the Ukrainians have made that very clear. Ukrainians have also said they're willing to withdraw their request for membership of NATO for the time being, for now. It doesn't preclude them from applying again sometime in the future. But if they're not going to have the NATO guarantee, they need another guarantee with the Americans, with the Europeans, and the Europeans have been putting together a coalition of the willing that is not NATO. It's actually broader than NATO, and that will provide the guarantee that the Ukrainians are looking for with U.S. support.
Well, Ambassador Taylor, in all this, we're also seeing a lot of mobilization within Europe. It does seem like the post-Cold War era of absolute security guarantee from America has crumbled, and Europe now thinks it needs to fend for itself.
The Europeans do recognize they're going to have to fend for themselves sooner or later. NATO is not crumbling. NATO is still very much alive and very much a deterrent to the Russians. As you have reported, the Russians have not invaded, attacked any NATO nation. They've attacked 2 non-NATO nations, which is why the Ukrainians and the Georgians earlier wanted to become members of NATO. NATO still exists to protect the current members. However, the Russians don't accept that. The Russians would like to maintain the capability and the possibility of continuing to fight. So this is what the Europeans, Ukrainians, and Americans are designing, a force, a coalition of the willing, less than the NATO, but broader than NATO, to defend against a Russian aggression.
Right, Ambassador Taylor, the fact that there was a marathon meeting in Moscow, 5 hours between the envoys and President Putin, and now we see a 5-hour meeting that took place with President Zelensky. This is day 2. We'll have to wait and see what really that brings about. I hope you'll be joining me further on as well for the coming days when we see more developments on the ground on the Russia-Ukraine war. Thank you so much for joining me for now.
Thank you, Gita. Good to be here.
Now, from bunkers reopening to conscription returning, Europe is no longer treating war as unthinkable, as you can see. As NATO plans mass troop movements and defense budgets surge, the continent is quietly preparing for a future without guaranteed peace or guaranteed American backing. Watch an in-depth analysis on Statecraft to understand why Europe is lacing its boots and what it means for global security. Europe is no longer treating war as a distant nightmare or a historical memory. Across the continent, something profound is shifting. Bunkers are reopening beneath cities. Teenagers are being asked to prepare for military service. Defense budgets are exploding. And behind closed doors, NATO is rehearsing the movement of hundreds of thousands of troops toward Russia's borders. This is not panic, and it is not rhetoric. It is quiet, deliberate preparation, driven by the belief that peace can no longer be taken for granted. But is Russia really going to go to war with Europe? Or is Europe strengthening deterrence or bracing itself for a conflict it believes may no longer be avoidable? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. For decades after the Cold War, Europe believed large-scale war on its soil was history. Borders were stable, armies were downsized, defense was outsourced to the United States of America. That era is now over. What Europe is doing today is not panic, it is preparation. And the scale of that preparation tells us one thing clearly. European leaders believe war is no longer unthinkable. It is plausible and possibly approaching. The warning shots are no longer subtle. Just days ago, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte delivered a blunt message in Germany. Russia, he said, is already waging a covert campaign against European societies. And Europe must be prepared for war on a scale last seen in the world wars of the 20th century. Not skirmishes, not proxy fights, but industrial societal war. Around the same time, Russian President Vladimir Putin issued his own warning. Moscow does not want war with Europe, he said. But if Europe starts one, Russia is ready. When Putin said this, it sounded threatening, even belligerent. But what followed from European capitals made his statement sound less like bluster and more like a mirror. Even Ukraine appears to be adjusting to this reality. President Volodymyr Zelensky, once uncompromising about NATO membership, is now signaling flexibility. The language has softened, the emphasis has shifted, security guarantees are being discussed, but NATO membership is no longer framed as inevitable. That alone should tell you how dramatically the strategic environment has changed. This also explains the urgency, the speed, the scale. Europe is racing against time to rebuild capabilities it dismantled over 30 years. Yet, there is an uncomfortable question at the heart of all this. Is Europe deterring war or preparing itself psychologically to accept one? Support for conscription drops as you move west and south. Protests have already erupted in Germany. Britain has ruled out a draft for now. Italy and Spain remain cautious. Societies that lived in peace for generations are struggling to absorb the reality of militarization. And that tension may be Europe's greatest vulnerability. You can build bunkers, you can print budgets, but can democratic societies sustain war readiness without breaking internally? For now, European leaders believe they have no choice. They argue that weakness invites aggression, that preparation prevents conflict, that deterrence works only if it is visible and credible. Whether that belief holds will depend on Ukraine. If the war there de-escalates through a negotiated settlement, Europe's mobilization may slow. If it escalates or spreads, this silent mobilization will become loud, fast, and irreversible. Europe is not marching yet, but it is lacing its boots. Conscription is returning. The silent mobilization has begun, not because war is certain, but because Europe believes the cost of being unready would be far greater. Thank you for watching Statecraft. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a $12 billion aid package for American farmers, promising relief from failing crop prices and trade war pressures, as also falling prices of crops. With funds drawn from tariff revenues and exports shrinking amid China tensions, can this bailout stabilize rural America or merely offer temporary relief? Here's a report by Shaurik Saha.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a $12 billion aid package for American farmers, aiming to ease the pain caused by falling crop prices and the impact of his trade policies. Unveiling the plan at the White House, Trump said boosting domestic farm production is key to lowering grocery prices and making America more affordable. The package, funded through tariff revenues, is designed to support farmers hit hardest by rising costs and shrinking export markets. According to the Agriculture Department, $11 billion will go to the row crop farmers growing corn, soya beans and cotton, while $1 billion is set aside for specialty crop producers. Payments will be calculated per acre, capped at $155,000 per farm and limited to operations earning under $900,000 a year. Funds are expected to start reaching farmers by the end of February. The move comes as U.S. farmers face mounting pressure from trade tensions, especially with China. Retaliatory tariffs have slashed American soybean exports, once a major staple of U.S.-China trade, while fertilizer and input costs have surged. Though many farmers welcome the relief, experts warn the package offers only temporary support. Farm bankruptcies are rising, debt is climbing, and smaller family farms remain especially vulnerable. As the trade war continues to reshape global markets, the bigger question remains whether short-term aid can truly secure the long-term future of America's farmers. With Saurik Saha, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said China has always regarded Saudi Arabia as a priority in its West Asia diplomacy and an important partner in its global strategy. It is willing to work with Saudi Arabia to elevate bilateral ties to new heights. Wang Yi made the remarks while co-chairing the 5th meeting of the political subcommittee of the China-Saudi Arabia High-Level Joint Committee in Riyadh with Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud. Wang Yi called on both sides to firmly grasp the direction of bilateral relations, resolutely support each other on issues involving core interests, better coordinate cooperation across various fields. Well, let's take a look at some other stories from across the world and World at a Glance.
Director and actor Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Singer were found dead at their home in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. A law enforcement official briefed on the investigation confirmed that Reiner and Singer were the victims. Authorities were investigating an apparent homicide. A manhunt has resumed related to the deadly shooting at Brown University in the US after officials said a person of interest would be released from detention. According to the top police officials, investigators did not think the person detained was the individual shown in the CCTV footage of the suspect that was released on the day of the attack. Hong Kong's High Court found media tycoon and pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai guilty of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces in the city's most high-profile trial under a China-imposed national security law that could see him jailed for life. Lai, who is 78 years old, has been found guilty of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces. The landmark case has drawn international scrutiny of Hong Kong's judicial independence amid a sweeping crackdown on rights and freedoms following 2019 protests.
That's all in this edition of India Today Global.